Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday, February 13th, 2026. We've got some weather to talk about, including some low end severe weather risk along with some rainfall. So let's get right into it. So we do have a low end severe weather risk, not really a big concern with this setup for us anyway. Most of the severe weather risk will remain out to our west in Oklahoma and Texas. Not really expecting much to reach southwest Missouri, northwest Arkansas, northeast Oklahoma. Can't rule out anything, but we are under just a general severe weather risk. Not really looking at anything too strong in the area. Now, if we do take a quick look out to our west, we don't really have a tornado risk, which is a good thing, as this does look to be more of a frontal type event. So there's gonna be mainly, large wind or large hail damaging winds. So, like I mentioned, that wind risk is in a good chunk of western Texas, into a good chunk of southwest and central Oklahoma, and then also the hail risk pretty much is that entire marginal risk all the way from the U.S. Mexico border all the way up through a good chunk of Texas into Oklahoma and southern Kansas. But that doesn't really apply to us. So if we zoom into southwest Missouri, northwest Arkansas, northeast Oklahoma here, really just have that general thunderstorm risk in place. Not really looking at anything too strong, too severe, anything like that. So kind of what we're seeing is, we could have some gusty winds, probably up to 50-ish. Not really looking at severe winds, maybe some, smaller hail might be possible with some of these stronger storms. We're not really expecting anything over an inch across the area. So that is the good news in terms of the severe weather. Our main risk for this weekend, which is Friday and Saturday, doesn't really actually involve the severe weather risk. It is actually a flooding risk, in all honesty. So what we're looking at right now is the Weather Prediction Center's day one margin or excessive rainfall risk. As you can see, a good swath of Texas, Oklahoma, southeast Kansas, northwest Arkansas, and southwest Missouri are under a marginal risk for excessive rainfall. So what that means is there's at least a 5% chance that rainfall rates could be over the amount that the ground could take, leading to flash flooding and flooding across the area. So that's kind of what that risk is outlining across the area. And then if we go to our day two, it really stays with us. Now you get towards, a good chunk of Arkansas, southeast Missouri, out towards Memphis and western Mississippi. You really start getting into some higher amounts, as you can kind of tell with that kind of that slight risk for that excessive rainfall. But most of our area is going to remain under that marginal, at least 5% for Friday and Saturday. So this is going to be kind of a 2-day event type thing. Most of it's going to be late in the night Friday, but majority of our rainfall will likely fall on Saturday. So getting right into our rainfall, what we're going to be kind of looking at, I have pulled up our 1 kilometer reflectivity here to kind of give it an idea of what we can see. Blues are going to be lesser values in terms of rainfall rates. You work up to your greens, yellows, and reds. That's where you're going to start getting your stronger rainfall rates at. So this is at 3 o'clock. We are using the 12Z HER, so a little outdated, but it works for what we need it to, as we are looking at more of a longer range picture here. In that sense, like I mentioned, we're looking right now at the 3 p.m. Run here. Not really seeing a whole lot happening. Got some out here in, starting to get into western Texas. We push through to 5 o'clock. What we start actually seeing is, we do have some of these storms trying to pop up over here in western Texas. Not really anything yet. We're starting to get a little stronger. Could have some hail. But one thing I want to point out is kind of what we're seeing with these little tiny little blips that we're seeing kind of in our rainfall data here. Not really anything of concern. They don't really look to get very strong, especially if we continue to go throughout the evening. We get maybe a little bit of red, not really very much. And they just kind of don't really get very strong. They don't get very big, so they can't really have a whole lot going on. But as we push to 10 o'clock, you're really starting to kind of see where that marginal risk is kind of taking place. So you use some green here to kind of highlight where that marginal risk is. You notice where a lot of these storms are, but if you're really south of this blue line here, This is going to be where you have your larger storms, could have some larger hail with those storms as well. If you're going to be north of the line, that's where you're going to have kind of your more of your discrete, could be, kind of all over the place, kind of a messy MCS type setup across the area where you could have some stronger winds, or you could have some low wind, severe hail, like an inch to inch and a half. But most of that risk is going to remain in Oklahoma and Texas for either of those. As we progress into the night, it just gets messy along the leading edge. Not really a whole lot of structure with it. Could have some, smaller hail in some of these cores through the evening. But as we kind of press through, our rainfall really starts pushing in the area right after midnight, honestly. So there's midnight. So 1, 2, 3 a.m. So once we get past midnight, our rain chances really start to increase. Then as we push throughout the day, we get to sunrise here. Basically from midnight to about sunrise, we're going to be looking at consistent rainfall. Be quite a little bit falling overnight. And then as we continue throughout Saturday morning, continues to work through rain most of Valentine's Day. And as we kind of continue to push through in the evening, it starts to finally let up around 6 o'clock. Seeing a little bit of some straggling storms in western Oklahoma, maybe some in Texas. Not really going to be an issue for us here in Southwest Missouri either at this time. As we kind of continue to push through, once we get after sunset, things really start pushing off to our east and our rain chances start to finally decrease. So we've looked at what we could potentially be seeing on radar. What are we going to be potentially seeing on precipitation amounts? So I pulled up our total quantitative precipitation forecast. Basically, this is the amount of water that's going to fall. So whether it be snow, ice, liquid, etc., stuff like that. But not really that big of a concern. This is going to be a rainfall type event. So that's going to equate to a 1-to-1 ratio. And therefore, we'll get your precipitation totals out of it. So as of 4 p.m. on Friday the 13th, not seeing any precipitation yet. It's kind of pushed through to 6 o'clock. I mentioned earlier those little cells out in southeast Kansas. Those do have a little bit of some rainfall with them. Like I said, they're not very big. They're not very strong. So not really seeing a whole lot of precipitation from them. As we push through to about the 10 o'clock hour, starting to see a little bit more from those cells, but really not anything really over a quarter inch yet. And as we continue to push through midnight, starting to see our increasing values out towards Wichita, out towards like Stillwater areas like that. Once again, still not really seeing a whole lot in our neck of the woods. As we push through to 2 a.m. now, starting to see our rainfall totals start picking up. Kind of a dry slot over southern Berry, McDonald, and even up into Newton, along with most of northwest Arkansas at the moment. But as we push through to 6 a.m., that really disappears. Starting to see our rainfall start ramping up in a lot of the areas. And as we push through to about noon, pretty much widespread. Looks like the morning's going to really have some decent rainfall rates with it. So, especially overnight. So a lot of that rainfall that we're seeing in the morning could lead towards some flash flooding potential throughout the day on Saturday. As we continue to push through the rest of the day, we get to about 10 o'clock. Looking at, by 10 o'clock, most of our precip's going to be off to our east. Not really much of a concern at the moment. But we're looking at pretty much 1 to about 3 inches across the area. That's going to be really variable depending where you're at. A lot of these storms are going to be very dependent on, or a lot of the precip amounts are going to be very dependent on where storms track, what the rates in those storms are going to be. So 1 to 3 inches is a good range to be in at the moment. As you can see, quite a bit of variance kind of across the area. So can't be too precise, but 1 to 3 inches of rainfall. Unfortunately, not a ton of that's going to soak in the ground as that rain comes down on ground that's been dry for so long, especially drought-stricken ground. That top layer, that crust is just pressed and hard. It is hard to be able to have the water penetrate that at a rate to where the ground can actually absorb everything that's falling. and that leads to your excessive runoff, which then could lead to flooding and flash flooding across the area. Now, as it continues, like I said, a lot of our rainfall could fall overnight. What that means is, as that excessive rainfall makes its way to ditches, creeks, streams, stuff like that, you're going to start seeing those tributaries start filling up. And then you're going to start seeing, especially low water crossings, start to flood over. And that is where this next point kind of hits. So make sure to turn around and don't drown. I know that seems very simple, but in a sense of, water can make things look like they're there that are not actually there. The currents can do things that are very weird. It can make a bridge look like it's completely there when it's been washed out, etc. Stuff like that. So it's very important that if you are driving at any point during the day or the night, if you see water over the roadway, do not attempt to cross it. You don't really know what is actually going to be under the water, especially once it gets above 2 or 3 inches. It can really play some games with your head on what it is there. And frankly, there's just no need to take that risk of potentially you getting injured or even worse, along with those that are going to be on their way to try to help you, whether that be first responders, neighbors, etc., stuff like that. There's just no need to take that risk. But let's not end this on a good note. We are finally seeing our rainfall come back to southwest Missouri, northwest Arkansas, northeast Oklahoma finally. It's been a fairly, really dry winter so far. So hopefully this can help out a little bit, especially with our overall increasing fire weather risk that we're seeing across the area and the continuance of some really rough drought conditions across the area. But 1 to 3 inches is a great way to start off trying to recover all that. So we'll keep tracking it throughout the weekend. So make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching it on Instagram or Facebook, also go to YouTube and hit like and subscribe. But while you're at it, if you're not liked Facebook or Instagram, hit the follow button or whatever it says on your end and hit the like button on this video. And if you feel like it helped you out, please consider hitting that share. And that's all I got for you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoy the video, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one. Stay safe.